One of my favorite handguns is the HK P30 series. I like them so much that I own all three models. HK P30. John Wick fans will know the P30L for long slide and the P30 SK subcompact. All of mine are variant 3, which is a double action single action trigger with a decocker on the back. They're reliable, they fit in the hand well, and they're just cool. But there's one problem, at least people say, and that's the trigger. Out of the box with the HK P30, I shoot a strong low left correlation, which is often due to poor grip, recoil anticipation, and slapping the trigger. Gray Guns developed a short reset kit for the P30 series, which includes a light firing block spring. I also purchased their flat face trigger. The idea is to increase leverage on the trigger and also have a consistent break at a 90-degree angle. And I also had my gunsmith install 11-pound hammer springs and nickel match sear springs in all the guns. HK advertises that the factory trigger breaks at about 11 pounds double action and 5 pounds single action. There's a ton of different variables that contribute to trigger pull, so every gun is going to be a little bit different. Show that we're clear. Resets maybe a third of the factory distance and breaks again. I've had my HK P30 the longest, and the double action is now breaking right at 8 pounds, and the single action is breaking at 3 pounds 6 ounces, just under 3.5 pounds. I've had my P30 SK for just over a year, and the double action is breaking at 8 pounds 3 ounces, and the single action breaks at 3 pounds 14 ounces. My P30L is the newest out of all of my guns, and it has a very low round count. The double action is breaking right at 8 pounds 6 ounces, and the single action is just around 4 pounds. There's a lot of debate about how light of a trigger is too light for self-defense, and in my opinion, the factory HK USP tactical trigger with the factory HK match trigger feels just right. The single action breaks just at 4 pounds. Trigger is a personal preference. I have friends that absolutely love the 1911, only shoot CZ or FN, SIG, etc. I've trained a lot with both live and dry fire on the HK. I've learned where that wall is for double action, single action, how long that reset is, and roughly know where the trigger is going to break. With the flat face trigger, that kind of threw all that training out the window. Breaking sooner with a 90-degree break created this mental kind of illusion of the trigger breaking a lot earlier than I expected it to, and it really threw me off. And again, with the P30, we're clear. Depending on where you place your finger, if it's up high or down low, you're changing how much leverage you're applying to that trigger, which will affect the weight of the trigger pull as well. USP, again, we're clear. Almost every factory HK trigger has some sort of curved trigger like this, and it forces your finger to be right here in the middle, so it's the same trigger pull every single time. I also have an HK 45 that I had the Gray Gun short reset kit installed on. The gunsmith informed me that the safety would only work as a decocker with that part in there, so I had him revert everything back to stock. I'm not sure if that is supposed to be that way or if other people have had that issue, but it did happen to me, so it's worth noting. And lastly, the USP also has a short reset kit in it. The USP series, I believe, does have a shorter trigger reset than the P30 series already. So this really shortened up the trigger in single action. In fact, the first time I live fired this at the range, I had a number of double taps that were completely accidental. So if you plan on using this for self-defense or duty weapon, please keep that in mind and do some training with live fire before you decide to start carrying this thing. Show that the weapon is clear. Single action, super light, crisp break. Even the double action, which is very heavy, still very smooth. I've talked to the guys at Grey Guns before. I know that they're a big fan of the LEM trigger. I know that a lot of these parts were designed with the LEM variants in mind. That's not to say that you can't use them in a double action, single action, or they're not good in a double action, single action. But it is a personal preference thing. And I think before you go out and you spend roughly $200 on parts, plus whatever your gunsmith is going to charge you, and don't have your gun for weeks or possibly a month or so, I think you should really consider whether or not these modifications are worth it and if they're right for you and your personal taste. When I first bought my P30L, I installed the Grey Guns short reset kit. I really loved how that trigger felt. So I think for me, a perfect trigger job for an HK P30 pistol is something with that short reset kit and leaving everything else stock or very close to stock springs. Ultimately, I think HK designed the P30 this way for a reason. I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with the trigger. I just need more time on that trigger. One of the best feeling triggers I've ever shot was a P40 law enforcement trade-in. It had who knows how many rounds through it. The trigger just felt amazing. High round counts and shooting hotter ammo is going to smooth out a trigger better than any mod will. I know that Langdon Tactical is working with Grey Guns on the P30 series now, and it couldn't have been weirder timing. I had already bought the parts, the gunsmith had my guns and was working on them. I think for most people it'll come down to whether or not they absolutely need an optics mount. For me, I personally don't care to have a red dot on any of my handguns, and I like having just high quality night sights like the Trijicon HDs. There is a huge price difference between a factory HK gun and the Langdon Tactical version. I think that for most people, spending that extra money and ammo is going to smooth out your trigger a whole lot and make you overall a lot more effective with the gun. So it's been exactly 6 months since I recorded this video, and I wanted to put a little update here at the end on what I actually ended up doing. So I did return all of the P30 springs back to stock. I found that I really like the weight of the factory springs once they're broken in, but I did leave the Grey Gun short reset plate in the guns. I reverted the trigger itself back to the factory curved HK trigger, and on the USP Tactical I made it completely stock again. In my opinion, that trigger is as close to perfection as you're going to get with a duty handgun. The HK factory match trigger is just phenomenal. I felt like it didn't need the short reset at all. Whereas the P30 reset to me feels like it's a little bit longer, so I did feel like it benefited from the plates. I did also end up purchasing a Browning Buckmark in .22 just to get back to the fundamentals of shooting. I bought a case of 5,000 rounds of ammo. I was just able to get a tremendous amount of training in with that handgun, and then go back to shooting my 9mm again, and I feel like it definitely made a big change in my shooting overall. So again, I want to reiterate the point that I made in this video, that your money is going to definitely be better spent on ammo and training as opposed to trying to perfect the trigger. If you have a new gun out of the box and you're looking for perfection, and you think that spending more money on the gun is going to make you a better shooter, it's really not. You really just need more practice, and spending that money on ammo is not gonna just improve you as a shooter. It will also smooth out the gun. So there is a big benefit in doing so.